Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival Lives Online Conversation 2021 Festival Edition. Please join me, Kelly Devine, the Artistic Director, and Nina Strike, the Executive Director, in conversation with Tara Chadwick and Janay Joseph from the film She Had a Dream, Eula Johnson's Fight to Desegregate Broward County. This film can be seen both in our in-person screenings and as part of our streaming screenings. The in-person screenings begin September 21st through September 26th, and all of those screenings will happen at the Winter Park Public Library. The online streaming portion of the festival begins September 27th and ends October 3rd. All of the information about scheduling, descriptions, and other upcoming events can be found at peacefilmfest.org. And now, please welcome Tara and Janay. Thank you for joining us, ladies.
Thank you for having us, Kelly.
Thank you.
Hi, and I'm going to start by asking Tara, I'm going to start by asking Janay, who's the director of the film, to tell us about the film. And then Tara, once Janay has described the film, can you tell us a little bit about your role with it?
So first, thank you for having us on this broadcast today. This film is called She Had a Dream, Eula Johnson's Fight to Desegregate Broward County. And it's basically about a local civil rights activist named Eula Johnson and her role in leading the wait-ins on Fort Lauderdale Beach. So typically, the way that civil rights history is taught is that we have the major events that happen. You learn about the March on Washington, and you also learn about the sit-ins and other national events. So this film culminates all of the work and grassroots activism that happened within our local community here in Broward County, which often is not spotlighted in within the current mainstream discourse of civil rights history. So our aims with this film is hopefully to educate others, not only within our community, but also outside of our community, about the work of this matriarch named Eula Johnson and her collaboration with other grassroots activists and civil rights activists. Dr. Von D. Meisel was also a co-collaborator with the wait-ins and other civil rights projects within South Florida. And I would also like to add that Eula Johnson was the first woman president of the NAACP. So focusing on Eula Johnson and her story kind of just culminates into how she's the linchpin for activism for African Americans in order to advance in civil rights within South Florida. So we hope that others who watch the film are able to be inspired by her story and her work and her struggles in order to take action within their own communities, whether it's helping through mutual aid or registering people to vote or going out to protest. There are just so many avenues that we hope that this film inspires others to take upon themselves.
And Tara, first of all, I'd never heard about the wait-ins before. If you can just tell our audience what that is, and then talk about your role with the film.
Sure. So the idea for creating the film really came out of History Fort Lauderdale's work in educating the community, and in particular, the young people. We do, a monthly distance learning program covering a range of topics. And of course, every January, we work to share information about the role that Fort Lauderdale has had in the civil rights movement and continues to have. And so this year happens to be the 60th anniversary of the Fort Lauderdale wait-ins and the 60th anniversary of the case that the city of Fort Lauderdale brought against Eula Johnson and the NAACP for disturbing the peace on Fort Lauderdale Beach during the summer of 1961. And so that case was won, and as a result of that, we are all able to enjoy the beaches and other amenities of the city of Fort Lauderdale. In fact, I believe the new logo is, we're all one under the sun, or something like that. So for History Fort Lauderdale, the mission of the organization really is, to preserve and tell and promote and research the history of our city. But what we've been finding through doing that is that, really our city has, a wider impact on the history of our nation, on the history of the world. And so the wade-ins were a phenomena that, there were lunch counter sit-ins, there were, there was sit-ins in buildings and offices. There was obviously the street protests that we're so familiar with. There's the bus boycotts that we're so familiar with. There was, the union strikes. There were a lot of components to the civil rights struggle, including, the voting rights and registration that, that we still experience today, struggles with. But the wade-ins particularly they did actually occur throughout the country in swimming pools. And, Jacksonville also has an important story to tell about their experience with the wade-ins. And I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was actually there with, as part of that. But here in Fort Lauderdale, the beaches were segregated. There was this endless, not endless, but there was this time when Black people could use one part of the beach, and then they got told they have to use another part of the beach, and then they got sent to another part of the beach. So the state park known today as the Eula Johnson Von D. Mizell State Park is the most recent colored beach. And so when the beaches were desegregated in 1961, then that is the time when Black people in Fort Lauderdale were allowed to use any part of the beach and continue to be able to do so today.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that this history is so recent, and we really, films like this. I think one of the one of the things that I always think is so important about reclaiming these stories in history is reminding people how little removed we are, and how much more we have to work, right? And I wanted to talk to both of you about the other thing that I was really struck by your film. It's a short film, but it packs so much information in such a really powerful structure. As you were talking, Tara, about connecting some of the dots, not only what was happening locally, but what was happening nationally. And so I would just like to commend you both for the achievement of your film. I think it's going to be really useful to people and really eye-opening to people. And so I just would, love to hear a bit about what went into your approach and how you crafted this film. And maybe we'll start with Janay.
So for my main approach for the film, it culminated out of my work as an intern with History Fort Lauderdale. And I had known for a very long time beforehand that I wanted to make a film for the community, whether it was going to be for educational use or a little known fact about our local history, which is another reason why I decided to focus on the story. And when Tara mentioned the dedication of the state park, I remember a couple years ago, this was back when I was still in high school, and I went with my Girl Scout troop to do a beach cleanup. And so during that trip on the Eula Johnson Von D. Mizell beach, I stumbled upon the dedication of the beach as the colored beach. And so I thought that was very interesting, how there's just this little piece of local history here, and I had never known that the beach existed until like I was 16 or 17 years old going to the beach. So I wanted to know more information about the history behind the beach's dedication and how it came to be. And this also led to the story that we would eventually tell in this documentary. So we started filming and researching the documentary in January of this year. That's when I began my internship with History Fort Lauderdale. And so we had to dig through not only the archives within History Fort Lauderdale, but also city archives and state archives. And we also contacted members within the Sistrunk community to get their accounts. And we were also able to interview Mr. Bobby Henry, who is the forefront of this film and the interview for this film. And so I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's basically the story of how the film came to be and why we were able to, the direction and the approaches that we took in the research for the film.
And Tara, what might you add to, to your experience in putting together this history and the approach that you had taken, as you said, that made sure that there was that connection between what was happening locally and what was happening on the larger national scale?
Yeah, so I mean, part of my excitement about this whole project was actually being able to recruit Janay, find Janay, for her to find us, because in the realm of like history museums, there's always so much to do, and there's never, like, I think, with many jobs it's like that. Teaching is like that too. There's always so much more that you could do and you just don't have the time. And so this effort to try to find interns who are interested and motivated and educated about history and about what life is like today, how best to reach new young audiences, how to use different forms of technology, like that was the first big part. Like, I mean, it was amazing to meet Janay, because when she said that, in our little virtual recruitment session, she said that her interests were in film and history. I almost fell out of my chair because I was so excited. I've never heard of anyone, with both of those interests before. So I was really excited from the get-go about what we might be able to accomplish. And I definitely wanted to, to focus, because her internship was going to be January to April. So I really wanted to focus right out of the door on trying to produce something that we could get out to students right away. Because, I have 2 children and I saw what they studied during, their civil rights unit. It was all national, nothing local. And there's so much local civil rights history to, to draw on. And so that was our first kind of mini project, was creating an outline and creating something that we could get out to students right away. And then from there, we had the content that we wanted. We knew that we had, I knew that we had these stories, the story, the oral histories were actually available in the museum before COVID, and they're push buttons. So as a result of COVID, there's no more oral histories that you can access in the museum, in person anymore, because, it's a tactile surface and we had to get rid of all our tactile surfaces. And so this was perfect timing, because I'm like, we still got to hear Eula's voice somehow. And so we were able to find the full version and integrate that into the film. And so, it's been a really exciting and wonderful process. And I remember saying to Janay, this is, these are the things that we need to cover. Here's some suggested questions. Here's, some people that we could try to interview. We weren't able to interview everyone that we wanted. And then I remember telling her, I'm going to leave all the, the directing, the cinematography, how you're going to cut this 30-minute interview into 50. I'm going to leave that all to you, all the hard stuff. And I was like, oh, I hope she does an okay job. And, she did an amazing job. You really did, Janay. Like, I hope that, I can't wait to work with you again. I hope we have lots of chance to work together in the future.
Thank you.
You did, Janay. Is this your first film?
Yeah, pretty much. I've only done smaller projects within like the course curriculum at my university, but this was the first like major film project that I've done outside of it, that I've actively researched for, shot, edited, and also attempted to distribute it outside of the confines within my university, because typically the way that the courses are structured are that I record the video, it's only shown in class, and then it never sees the light of day outside of it. So
Well, hopefully lots and lots of folks are going to see this film now. And what Janay, can you talk a little bit about what you learned? And as you said before, you were doing university projects, and now actually working out in the field. What did you learn, or what was different than your expectation about taking on this project and seeing it through?
So when I entered university, and also for the longest time now, I've always wanted to work with both within like historical studies, but also within film studies, because I believe that history as a subject, it's very interesting, but also myself personally, I'm more of a visual learner. So being able to visualize and experience the stories of real people through a film medium is very essential to not only myself, but for a lot of people. So the main reason why I crafted this film the way that it is so that others can experience Eula's story and her triumphs, and also the road barriers that she had in order to desegregate public facilities and eventually the school system as well. Because I feel like this was the most effective way in telling this story. When you hear Eula Johnson's voice in this film, you hear about, how she congratulates herself and her other collaborators in their triumphs. You hear like the sadness in her voice, the frustration that she feels with the system that she has to fight against and also work within in order to get the goals across for the bettership of her community. And I also found it essential that she was the one to narrate her own story, because within the process of researching for this story, there were little known details about her personal life and also her work outside of the oral history and the narrative that she provided. So the conclusion that I drew from that was that for the longest time, she never really had any agency within her own story. So the way that the film was designed for her to narrate her story, and for her to be our guide essentially into the achievements that she had in desegregating Broward County. So
that is a really important insight, Janay, that you brought to that material, that insight of the agency that you wanted, to be able to shine through for this woman who had worked so hard for her community. So I think you did a beautiful job with that. And that's a beautiful insight. And Tara, just briefly, you had touched on the fact that Eula's own voice, people used to only be able to access it if they could touch the button in the museum. And now we get the opportunity to hear Eula narrate her own documentary. I know this was done, having to change the tactile aspect was probably in reaction to COVID. But in what ways now, after this experience, are you inspired to find other ways to go beyond the museum, or to invite more people into the museum experience?
Absolutely. That's definitely one of the few silver linings that we've all experienced from COVID, is that ability to really reach outside of wherever we are, and engage in digital and virtual experiences that we may not have otherwise been able to. And so the creation of this film it was sort of like this was also our first ever virtual internship. We've never had a completely remote or virtual internship either, and nor did the university allow it up until, up until the advent of COVID. And so it was kind of by necessity, but also by design, because as I had mentioned, we already do this monthly distance learning program. And what we've learned from the last 6 years of doing that is that we can reach many more students also by offering digital programs than what we're able to in-person field trips. And that was even before COVID. COVID, all field trips and schooling, everything had to be online. But it is I think a happier balance that we're going to be able to all live with going forward, is that ability to experience things in person, but also that opportunity to expand that experience digitally, or or engage in it for the first time digitally. And it is beautiful the way in which Janay was able to edit and summarize the full length of the digital recording that we had, and just really focus on those those key issues in the way that she did, in the way that you'll hear. And when I first presented Janay with the first part of the internship was to figure out the design of what we were going to achieve within the limited time that we had. And so in the civil rights curriculum that we created a few years ago with another intern, there were a list of people, like important, historical figures that have engaged in civil rights struggles here in Fort Lauderdale. And, and I gave Janay the choice, like I did mention, I was like, it's the 60th anniversary. It would be nice if we did something about the wait-ins, but here's all the people that you can choose, you could choose to do it. I would really like us to be able to do a video on one of these people. And so she chose Eula, and it was, the result is just, you'll see, it will speak for itself. And so my hope now is that we can go back to that list and do videos on all the other people that we didn't get to do yet, and share all of them on. Eventually this film will be available on the History Fort Lauderdale's YouTube page. We're just waiting for the festival circuit to complete itself.
That makes sense. And one of the last things I'd like to ask you both before I turn it back to Nina is, and Janay, you sort of already touched on this when you described the film itself, is the way that the intention behind your film and Tara, your organization's mission, is about providing models, educating people about issues so that we can make our communities and our own lives more just, more peaceful. And so Janay, if you can maybe just unpack that just a little bit more about how you imagine this film will play a role in impacting people's lives for the better.
So we hope that when others watch this film, they feel inspired by Eula Johnson's message for all of us to live together in harmony. The title of the film itself is "She Had a Dream." That quote was attributed to the late Alcee Hastings. He was the representative of our district who recently passed this year. And the full quote reads, "She had a dream, and those who are," I think the second half of the quote is that those in the future will also be beneficiaries of her vision, essentially. So for others to watch this film, they realize that hard work through civil disobedience and changing the systems that we live in now so that they're just for everyone is extremely effective. She mentions the importance of voting within this oral history. She mentions the importance of public protest in order to invoke policy change. So it's not only to put pressure on local representatives, but also to dismantle the system entirely so that it works for others. So we hope that others who watch this film are able to take away that messaging for themselves, to see the changes that they can enact within their own communities, so that the system works in benefit to their neighbors, their friends, their family, and others who might be struggling within the system.
Oh, that's fantastic, Janay. And Tara, how does your organization, you say it's going to be available on the website soon?
It will. I believe we have our community premiere scheduled for sometime in February. And as soon as that's completed, then we are going to open the link, and anyone can view it anytime. Of course, we would encourage anyone who's using it in an educational or institutional setting to book a chat with the director so that we can provide the context and do some additional curriculum building and conversations around it. But in terms of the impact on the community, it's a little emotional, because besides my work as the curator of exhibitions at History Fort Lauderdale, I also serve as the current acting president of our civic association. And where I live is 1.5 blocks away from Eula Johnson's house. And throughout my life, my job that I got from my mom has always been to work to make my community better, no matter where I live, and no matter how much or how little I can work at that every day. That is my task. And so the result of this film that on me has been, and what I can see that my hope it will also have on the community, is that extra encouragement and push that we all need to keep at it, to not give up, to do that little bit more, no matter if it's, one extra day or one extra minute or one extra hour of work, of organizing, of struggle, because we know that it is a struggle to make time for community. We know that that's not part of our, curriculum that we're teaching our children, through the public education system, that, always. And so the realization that of the impact that Eula really had on all of our lives today has been a very deep and very needed encouragement for me. And I think it will be on the community as well.
So Janay, what's next for you? And are you going to continue to work with History Fort Lauderdale and tell more of the stories through that? And what else is on the horizon for you?
So I'm hoping to continue to make more films and also collaborate with History Fort Lauderdale in the future. I'm currently in a documentary filmmaking class, so it's been interesting having to make a documentary beforehand and then jump into this class. But it's actually very beneficial, because I'll be able to reinforce everything that I've had to learn basically on my own when shooting, directing, and producing this project. But as for beyond that, I'm hoping to go to film school in the future, or to have some sort of structured curriculum surrounding filmmaking, and to collaborate with other filmmakers, both locally or maybe even outside of my community. And that's pretty much it.
And Tara, you've already talked a little bit about, personally in relation to the film and the impact on you, but what's in the future for History Fort Lauderdale, and how can people watching this support that work? And Janay, yours as well.
Well, hopefully we'll have more history, more art, more story sharing, and continue to grow that relationship between the community in Fort Lauderdale, the community in South Florida, and the community around the world, and the museum, by both in-person and digital experiences. You can definitely follow History Fort Lauderdale on Instagram or go to our website, historyfortlauderdale.org, for information about our current and upcoming exhibits. We do have a contemporary art series where we use art from contemporary communities in order to interpret the history of Fort Lauderdale in new and exciting ways. And so that's what's always happening, what's always next.
Fantastic. That's great news. And we will definitely keep track of both of your work together and individually. And I really appreciate your time and your generosity of spirit. And again, as it says on the slide, if you want to follow Janay on Instagram, it's Janay DP. And to follow Tara, it is WABIGUN. And of course, please go to the organization's website, historyfortlauderdale.org. And of course, we would really appreciate if you check the film out as a part of this year's Global Peace Film Festival, which starts in September 21st through the 26th for the in-person screenings at Winter Park Library. And our virtual screenings begin September 27th and run through October 3rd. All the information is provided on peacefilmfest.org. Thank you again, and we'll see you at the next Glow.